So I'm here with my colleague Brandon, who's phoning in, Zoom meeting from Savannah, Georgia, right, Brandon?
Yes, exactly.
Where it's probably warmer than it is where I am and almost in Canada, practically the
Guaranteed.
North Pole.
Definitely warmer. Way too warm most of the
Way too
time.
warm, yeah.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to do today is we have our new RapidScan assessment tool, and we want to walk you through what the output of that looks like and how you can sort of get some interesting information from it. So let's start here. And so what are we looking at here, Brandon?
So this is the output from the tool. These four folders will populate in a zip file for you when you run the tool. And of most interest will be this line counter folder, which has this report that I'm about to show you. But you can also see some dictionary counters if there's a technology that's recognized, like Visual Basic 6 or SQL or something like that. If there's a technology that's recognized, it'll populate this dictionary counter report as
That's
well.
like keywords and stuff, right?
Yeah, but we're gonna focus in on this guy in this video here, the line counter report, which is this CSV file right here, which is a little overwhelming. It's basically gonna do an inventory of all the code you've pointed it at, and it'll tell you what files you have, what extension they are, what associated technology that is. If there is a technology recognized, it'll tell you what associated technology that is.
So
Status.
it's metadata about your code. It's not code itself.
Exactly right. It's information about the code that you've put into, or you've pointed the tool at RapidScan. This is if the file is a binary file type, how large the file is, and then how many blank lines, code lines, comment lines, or if there's other lines that we're not able to categorize.
Mhm.
And it'll do that for every single file in your directory, which could end up being very large.
Oh, that's a
So
lot of files.
yeah, it doesn't matter. You can point it at as large a directory as you want. It might take a minute to get through it, but it'll eventually shoot you out this report right here.
Yeah. So that's one thing I think people need to be aware of is that if you do, like I did, pointed at a couple hundred gigabytes of code, it is going to run for a while. So don't assume that it's stopped. Just let it go. Go have a beer or lunch or go to bed or whatever, and eventually it'll get done.
Right,
Mhm.
exactly. So we can kind of add value to this. This is kind of hard to make sense of. This is
Right.
just a bunch of rows in a CSV, and we're going to hopefully add value in a couple different ways. The first is by pairing it with this guy, this spreadsheet that we'll send out to you. That kind of gives you some added information about your run that you just did. Some summary data here and some ratios on how it compares with some other data that we've seen out in the wild, and I'll show you that here in a second. But this data tab that you see here should be the same data that we were just looking at. And if it, for some reason, isn't, you can always click this button right here that will pull in the data from before.
So I
All you
just
got to
need to
do,
drop this. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say, all you're going to do is drop this file, this Excel file. Now, this is a macro enabled file because it has this button here. So you'll most likely be prompted in Excel to enable macros when you first open the file. But you just need to drop it in the same directory that this guy is in here. So you should end up with two files in here. So whenever you get the template file, I guess I can go find it here. It might take me a second here. But once you get the template file here, which I think is in this folder right here. Yeah, this is our template file here. You'll just drop it into that folder we were at before. And it will automatically pull the data from the CSV file. And again,
And you
if
want to
it,
open the template, not the CSV.
right, if you open the CSV, it's just gonna look like this guy.
Yeah.
But if you open the template file, it will open this this other folder.
And it can take a minute to run the macros, right?
Yeah, it'll, depending on how large, if this is a really small output CSV file, maybe you got 50 files that you pointed it at, it should load pretty quickly. But if you do like John did and point it at an entire drive, it might take a couple minutes to open the first time you open it there. And again, if you open it and it doesn't look like this data is the right data, make sure you check the data tab and hit this refresh data source to kind of refresh the data. Well, I guess that makes sense. Refresh data source. So just to...
If you can't get it to work, give us a call and we'll help you figure it out.
Yeah. So just to, I guess, stroll through this. This is kind of your intro page, your summary page with a bunch of summary information about your entire run that you just did. This is a page that breaks down that by technology. So you can see, you know, based on the technologies we were able to recognize, or in this case, not recognize. It's going to summarize how large those files were all put together, how many lines, all lines there were. That's code lines, comment lines, blank lines, and other lines. And then it breaks out into each of those subcategories: code, comment, blank. And you also get some handy little charts here. This first one tells you, is looking at all lines of code. This next one here is looking at how they're distributed. So our blue line is code lines. Our red, I guess, column here is comment lines. Gray is blank and yellow is other. So this is kind of the distribution of each of those lines of code. So just kind of some general inventory information on what technologies you have. And if you're really interested in breaking that way, way, way further down, you can get the same information, but broken down by extension this time instead of technology.
Interesting.
So you can cut into it if you want to.
So let's like that. So that top right chart is just like looking at VB. So how many, well, no, it's everything, but you've got VB files, form files.
Yeah, exactly. It's the extension VB, which hopefully is down here somewhere. I think I saw it.
FRM and FRX and VB. Right.
Right. It's that extension that you see here. And this is kind of just breaking it down by the total breakdown, I should say, by how many lines of code you have throughout all these extensions. So do you have more code lines? Do you have more blank lines? If you have a lot of other lines, that may mean you have a lot of technologies that are not categorized yet. So that's kind of what we're looking at on this page. If you want to compare yourself, see how cool you are compared to some of the other code that we've seen out in the wild, this is a little summary of that. So for example, our VB6 technology, you've uploaded this many files and your code to comment ratio is 7.6, meaning you've got 7.6 code lines per every comment line. And what have we seen out in the wild for this particular technology? We usually see about 12.5 code lines per comment line. And that's how you can interpret this here.
Interesting.
And this gives you a little breakdown between what you've got versus what we've seen generally out in the wild.
The orange is an average that we've calculated based on all the metadata that we've collected over the years, right?
Exactly.
Or at least a big chunk of it. I don't know that we have every last bit of it, but
yeah, it's definitely not every
we've
last
seen definitely a lot of VB6. So we should have really good data on VB6. Maybe not so much on XML or SQL.
Right, but constantly improving every time we do a new migration. So just to keep on moving through the Excel spreadsheet, if you're looking for all the extensions that we really couldn't tell you, or not that we can't tell you what they are, but that we weren't parsing them. Maybe they're not code files. Like for example, this is clearly not a code file, right? This is just a document. This is going to compile all those in one spot for you. And if you want to find out what are your binaries, that's your last tab here. This will break down all of your binary files and how large they are, how many you have. So that's our little spreadsheet that we've got to accompany your output from the RapidScan tool.
And again, you can get a copy of this template by just responding to any kind of emails you get, or if you just send us an email, we'll send you the template and help you get it to make your CSV data a little more meaningful. Yeah. But Brandon, because you're a data scientist, yay, you went all in, right?
Yeah, well, I felt like we could do just a little bit better than sending you a Excel spreadsheet. So there were a few different tools that I'm more familiar with that I thought, hey, what if we kind of share in a little more insightful and maybe even interactive way what you've got going on in the report CSV output file that's generated there. So we can go to Power BI. If you're not familiar with Power BI, it's a Microsoft tool for BI, for business intelligence. So this has, again, a bunch of tabs just like the spreadsheet did. And in the last ones, we have a little more comparative data that we can look at, but we also have the data presented in a more interesting way. So this is this is called a sunburst here. And this is the data that is the output. Again, it's all this data here. Looks like this might be from a slightly different run, but same example here. So if I click on this extension, it'll tell you what percentage of all your files that extension was. Of course, what technology that belongs to as well. And this table over here will kind of update as we change that. So if you want to see what extensions are actually associated with VB6, you can see that here, as well as the count of every file there. And you can click wherever you want on this to find out just a little bit more. So that's our sunburst. That's kind of a welcome page that we do. And then we'll walk with you through some of the rest of these here, like the technology summary. There was a technology summary on this here, and this is what that showed. And then in our Power BI model, it looks a little more colorful, I guess, but the same chart data can be found here, and these are our graphs to kind of illustrate that. So in this particular example, or run of the code, it looks like there was a lot of VB.NET code lines, a few blank lines, well, a lot of blank lines, and some comment lines here, but the other technologies that are present, much smaller. We have a lot of VB.NET versus VB6. And again, this extension summary will be very similar to what you just saw, except it's broken down by all of the extensions. But the more interactive, this is just kind of a rehashing of that same data you saw in the spreadsheet. We can make our ratio information just a little more interactive. For example, this is giving you all your technologies, how many code lines, comment lines, blank lines you had, etc. And this tree map here is giving you all of those associated extensions. So of all your VB.NET, what extensions do you have associated with that, and what percentage of the files that you pointed RapidScan at are those extensions or have that extension. But Power BI lets us filter this and make it a little more meaningful. So if I just wanted to focus in on one extension, like this one right here, VB.NET, it'll show me the breakdown of code lines to blank lines to comment lines, and we can actually see what that data is here. And it'll also show me a visual, this giant red block here, that shows me how much of those files that we pointed it at are which extension, right? So the VB extension counted for 99.56% of all of the VB.NET files that we uploaded. And then of course, it looks like there were 23 project files, which is a much smaller percentage. If I hover there's a little piece down here that's not red. If I do a different technology, again, it's the same thing, it's broken out. So we can filter by any technology that was present when you pointed the tool at it. So again, just a breakdown of the lines, and this is a breakdown of what percentage of that technology is associated with a certain extension here. So Power BI lets us be a little more interactive, which is awesome. And I'm a big fan of tree maps, so you'll see those a lot. John, you might have to adjust your glasses there, but I'll see it a lot, right? We'll see it a lot, these tree maps. For example, this file size breakout is also a tree map. And this gives us a drill down into all of the files that we saw, what percentage each of those files makes up. It's pretty easy to see that this was the file type we saw most, followed by this and this. If we don't want to see the technologies, if we only want to see technologies that we recognized, we can again filter that and filter out the other technologies. And we'll see that the VB extension was the majority of what we saw in this run of RapidScan.
VB, the gift that keeps on giving.
Continuously, always keeps on giving.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, we have the non-parsed extensions and the binaries from the spreadsheet, but we can get a little bit more interactive with our comparison tool here. So let's take a quick look at some of these comparison data sets here. So what these interestingly spaced horizontal bar charts are trying to tell us is, again, the ratios from what we saw in certain lines of code in certain technologies versus what we've seen out in the wild, right? So the orange here is what we've seen out in the wild, and the blue here is what we've seen in your particular run, the run that we just did with you here. So for example, in our code here, we've seen a lot of VB.NET. And I guess out in the wild, we've seen a code to blank. Oh, this is code to blank lines. This probably be more interesting over here. Code to comment lines. Let's see, VB.NET, we've got a 29 code lines to comment lines ratio out in the wild. And in this particular data set, we've got 29.19. So that's actually very similar to what we've seen kind of out in the wild. And this is all summarized down in this chart.
But that TypeScript one is way out of whack.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, right?
It's interesting. Whatever run of data this is, looks like they had some TypeScript with 630 code lines per each comment line. So it's probably not very well commented code there.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah, this is kind of what that is indicating there. And if we want to zoom in on a specific technology, we can do that again by clicking over here. Like if we want to be really offended by that TypeScript graph, we can see that over here. Interesting that it's a similar ratio, not similar numbers, but a similar ratio for code to blank lines and comment to blank lines as well. This must be a very small number of blank lines in this script that we've seen here. And of course, we can do that for any specific technology, VB.NET. We can add in more than one if we want. Notice that it won't necessarily populate over here if we didn't see it in that particular run.
Right.
So it's kind of a little more interactive tool to let us look at those ratio comparisons. And if we want to get really, really into it, I guess I'll come back to that one. But if we want to get really into it, there's a couple of scatter plots here that will give you a very good indication of where you are with your run versus where what we've seen out in the wild. So let's just pick one technology here. Guess VB.NET, or maybe the TypeScript, because that should be kind of interesting to look at. So in this, looks like we refreshed it a couple times. Well, first I'll just explain it here. So each one of these dots represents a file, or in the case of the aggregated data, like the data that we've seen out in the wild, the dots may represent a group of files that have similar information with them. So not every dot in the aggregated data represents an individual file, but every dot in the data that you uploaded does represent a specific file. So you can kind of see where your files are as far as code lines. This is blank lines to code lines, this is comment lines to code lines. And you can see which extension they belong to, if it's a particular one here. I think we can see that on the aggregated dots there too. And if we want to zoom in on a particular, let's do Power Builder. We haven't done Power Builder yet. Oh, there wasn't any Power Builder in that run. This is all only, if this is empty down here, that means there was nothing from your run. If this is, or excuse me, this one down here. So that's not as exciting. Let's maybe SQL. We haven't looked at SQL yet.
SQL.
Yeah, it looks like there is a little bit of SQL. No,
It looks like we don't have any industry data for SQL.
Yeah, we don't have any industry data for SQL.
How about C#?
We're going to build that as we go.
There we go.
C sharp, sure.
C sharp.
So all these darker colored dots represent a particular file, and they represent this blank to code lines ratio or comment lines to code lines ratio. This,
So if that's mine, I'm looking at the bottom, it looks like I didn't comment it very well.
right, yeah, especially compared to some of the code that we've seen generally out there. But this line here is kind of a mean line or a regression line that shows kind of the expected average based on all the code we've seen, but also including the code that you've uploaded here as well. So this is kind of a regression line average that we would expect to see. And you can kind of see there's a lot of clustering down here. So if we were to zoom in on this quadrant right here, it might look a little bit different as far as like how low this line is to the x-axis. But this is a good representation of that.
Well, and it's also kind of showing you where they cluster around. So those are files, how many lines of code in each file. So like if you look at those, it shows you that you have a lot of small files, which is kind of a standard programming practice now, right? You want to break things up into small chunks.
Right. Absolutely.
But industry, it looks like they've got stuff that goes just crazy numbers, like more than 10,000 lines of code in a single file. Unless that's an aggregate, it's hard to know, right?
Yeah, these dots are kind of averages of files that were already kind of similar, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I've got my current run, whoever I am, I've got stuff out here in the 20,000+ lines of code range for one file. And you kind of, that might be something, and then 328 comments in that file. So that might be a good file to go take a look at and go like, what exactly are we doing here?
Yeah, what's happening
Right?
in this file?
If I'm going to refactor, maybe that's a great place to start looking at some of these monsters that aren't very well commented.
Yeah, exactly right. And it's kind of why we wanted to put some more interesting visuals together so that we could kind of see maybe some of these outliers right here. What's going on with these guys? Maybe we want to look a little bit closer at what's happening out here. Or if you had something way up in here, be like, okay, well why would you have that many comments per code? Maybe a ton of code has actually been commented out. So that might be something worth looking at too.
I was thinking that they, put the Homer's Iliad in there.
It could be true.
Just for grins, right?
Yeah, well, you got to keep your developers curious.
You never know.
And that's pretty much it. I think I hit everything. I may have missed one or two, but we always love, or at least, okay, I won't say we, I'll say me. I always love clicking around inside here and seeing what I can learn. So hopefully it's a process that we can do together soon. Yeah.
I like it. And again, if you're watching this video and you have questions about this stuff, you can reach out to Brandon, you can reach out to me, you can send an email to info@mobilize.net. I'll put some links up at the end of the video so people can click on how to get hold of us and stuff. But this is cool.
Cool.
Share it with your friends. Bore your uncle at dinner when you go to Thanksgiving. Show him your sunburst chart.
Exactly. Tell him to get RapidScan and point it at his C drive and see what happens.
Or at your refrigerator, right?
Well, yeah, either way. I'd love an inventory of what's in my refrigerator right now. I can only imagine.
I found some things in my refrigerator last night that I'd rather not talk about. They were way in the back. And
yeah, I wonder if we could inventory our refrigerator by date it was first placed in the refrigerator. That would be a really scary chart, I think.
That really would. But that's coming, right? Because they're gonna put microchips on each piece of popcorn or something. I don't know.
Exactly. Your smart fridge.
Yeah, right. All right, Brandon, thanks very much. This has been very helpful, and thanks for watching, everybody.
Yeah.